If I told you that artificial wombs would quickly transform how most people are born, you might believe me. And if you don't, it's because you haven't seen my first video on this, which you can fix with a trip to the description. But if I say artificial wombs may change society, change family, and lead to political revolution, and that this could potentially have some positive outcomes, would you think I was crazy? Well, I've been thinking about the possible impacts of artificial wombs for a long time, and by the last scenario in this video, you might be a little crazy too. So first, a quick recap. What are artificial wombs? They're essentially a tech that's currently in development that'll grow a baby from a single cell to a crying newborn completely outside a mother's body. This video is about the possible impacts of the tech, not about the nitty-gritty of how it'll work or how it looks. They might look like a lava lamp, or they may be completely sealed, because after all, babies look like giant mole rats until well after birth. Either way, assume that once they're proven safe, they'll be used widely. Where can that lead for society? Well, we naturally think of dystopias when it comes to tech like this, and it's understandable why. When we change something as fundamental as how we're born, it could potentially lead to dehumanization. But this fear of what could go wrong can sometimes make us overlook the more positive possibilities. Could this breakthrough perhaps actually improve our humanity in certain ways? Well, let's take a look at 3 increasingly wild scenarios enabled by artificial wombs, and my goal's not to convince you that everything's gonna smell like roses. Just give a bigger perspective on the change that may come. Again, this is a new channel I'm trying on how tech can impact the way we live, so would love any feedback you have. Alright, let's start with something uncontroversial. Abortion. Will artificial wombs increase reproductive rights? Let's look at Alice, a high school junior who just got a plus sign on her pregnancy test, and is very much not ready to have a baby. There's been a bit of debate over the past years on when she can and can't have an abortion, and for the state or country she lives in, she's past that limit. How do artificial wombs change this? Well, before, Alice's only options might be to spend a school year with a growing baby bump, and then maybe consider adoption after birth. But she lives in a world of artificial wombs, and here, religious or governmental organizations may have centers set up where women can transfer a pregnancy to an artificial womb instead of ending it. Call it a pre-birth adoption. Is this a good thing for Alice? On an individual level, it seems like a win-win. Alice gets her life back, perhaps without even wrecking her high school reputation, and she's got a killer college essay. For pro-life folk, it also offers a way to reduce abortions in a non-invasive way. But do you really think it's going to play out this simply? Because it's easy to imagine this supercharging debates about less abortion rights if transferring to an artificial womb is always an option. Would pro-lifers get behind this use case quickly, or would they avoid it for a while like they did with IVF? Then there's a matter of who's responsible for the babies that got transferred. What equilibrium would or should society settle in? Please argue past each other in the comments. So that was an easy one, right? Let's get crazy. How can artificial wombs change the course of countries? Let's look at Marcos, a minister of health tracking his country's cratering birth rates and trying to figure out how to tell his prime minister they're doomed. Does Marcos' story sound familiar? Because most countries can't get their citizens to knock each other up enough these days. For the gold medalists in non-reproducing, like Korea, Japan, and Italy, schools are emptying already. Why don't artificial wombs fix this issue for poor Marcos? Well, having a kid isn't easy. But raising one takes a lot more. And not just money, utopias like Sweden have tried and failed with small handouts. The bigger issue is time. On one side, parents are expected to put in more time now, to shuttle kids around, attend college prep classes, and also create core memories. On the other side, there's so many more fun things people can do with their time than even 30 years ago. Why give that up? The rich can buy time with tutors and au pairs and have it all, but most can't. Marcos, though, proposes a radical solution to Parliament. What if the government had and raised kids for people? Public schools exist, so what if they built public nurseries to raise babies in artificial wombs and provide full early childcare, and then schools could even become boarding schools? The aim still for people to have and raise their own kids is just that they get support during the rough early toddler years, or have a guaranteed babysitter when life gets busy. What Marcos only hints at is that if this still doesn't raise birth rates, the setup could just as easily have and raise kids all the way. The PM takes one look at this and says, yeah, an idea crazy as this one, the public has to vote on it. What's Marcos' pitch here? One, he might say, look around. It won't be quite children of men in the future, but as kids decline, people will feel it, economically and in other ways. Artificial wombs are an option to reverse that without pathways like mass immigration, which many countries don't like. Second, Marcos would insist the nurseries are run locally, same as schools are today. They would raise kids the way we did through most of history, not with 2 nuclear parents, but with a village. The nurseries would hire kind caregivers, of course, who love kids, but the key is they would also lean on the local community. No one would be forced to help, but they might get benefits for stopping in and volunteering, and groups like the elderly might naturally enjoy spending a lot of time with the next generation. And to be clear, even with all of this, most kids would still be born and raised with families as usual. So I'm guessing Marcos has sold you on all this by now. Wait, he hasn't? Well, yes, there are ways countries can abuse something like this. And yeah, it's fair to ask whether this could ever match good parents, though it can probably easily beat below average ones. But here's the simple question. Will birth trends reverse? Because if not, how long till a country tries a radical solution like this? And if they do it, what's a way they can do it well? But let's drop one level deeper into this rabbit hole. Let's say in some form or another, people are born without parents in the future. How does that change family and society overall? Let's say the last story happened and look at Caleb, who was born and raised in a community nursery and is now headed out into the real world. First, how do you imagine Caleb's life? Let's challenge ourselves here and put aside dystopia for a moment. Say his country figured out nurseries. He had kind caregivers and teachers, grew up with stories from adopted grandparents, and has a group of kids and a couple caregivers he came up with that are essentially family. People he'll see for the holidays and argue about with politics on group chats. It's his little tribe and he loves them. Still, he's not prepared for what the real world brings. Because even though he goes to the same college as kids who grew up with families, he notices they get the best jobs easier. Those kids relate to each other better, their parents all know each other. And yeah, that happens today with the rich, but Caleb's group chat buzzes with convos about family privilege. But there's one injustice that goes too far for Caleb. It's bad enough that families provide all these informal advantages, but the law says they get to inherit most of what their parents and generations before made? Sure, not everyone gets a lot, but many get way more than anyone in Caleb's little tribe, and the tax on it is tiny. For Caleb, this has to change. How do you feel about Comrade Caleb here? I'm conflicted. Because on one hand, family is the thing we value most. We work hard to make our kids' lives better. Of course we do. It's in our genes. The whole point of evolution is to give your kids unfair advantage. But at the same time, we also gripe about trust fund kids and nepo babies who get a ton without earning it. Because deep down, we know that we all benefit when society runs on true merit and the best person gets a job. Family makes society unequal, but our values clash with our nature here. For Caleb, though, it's much simpler. He starts a movement to protest inheritance. What happens if 1 of 10 people is from a public nursery and joins in? Or if that number is even larger? Is it a dystopian world they're fighting for? Or perhaps one that better lives up to our values? These are just 3 stories artificial wombs make possible. If I haven't convinced you that they'll make the world better, that's because there's no guarantee they will. But hopefully you do see there's more futures out there than just dystopian ones, and perhaps we can chart a path to one of the better visions. You may be wondering how close we are to any of this. In this case, full artificial wombs are still a couple decades away at least. Current testing is still only on partial wombs designed to help very early premature babies, but still, as the tech improves to cover more and more of the pregnancy, they can start changing some simpler but fundamental things. But before I say more there, thanks so much for trying out this video. If you like exploring how innovation may change our lives, then hit subscribe because I have so much more to share. And I'd love to hear what you want me to go deeper or broader on. Now, these scenarios may be complex, but the impact of artificial wombs on pregnancy itself, that's positive, and in ways you may not have considered. To find out more, click on the link here.